Hi guys, this is Andre and welcome to another video on AF Swift Tutorials channel. In this video, I would like to explain data bindings in Swift. Data bindings is a very useful thing when we're talking about MVVM architecture, as we needed to decouple our view model and view to operate without tight coupling. So what the data binding is? Data binding is a process that establishes a connection between the app UI, in our case view controller that represents view, and the data that's represented by view model. There are different ways to create data binding in Swift, and in this video I like to cover 3 of them. First one is creating using a closure. Second, we're going to be creating our own helper class called observable. And the third one is we're going to make use of Apple's combined framework to create a data binding. We'll start from a simple MVVM project. We're going to create a cat structure which will represent our model. Then we're going to be needing cat view model and 3 labels and a button on our view. Okay, I will make it faster right now to create MVVM, and then I'll get back to creating data bindings. In order to facilitate creating a UI view controller from code, I will add a static function inside of extension for UI view controller to create our UI view controller using storyboard UI. So now we have created our basic view model setup. So now let's get back to data bindings. So let's start from a closure based data binding. So let's get back to cat view model. So in order to make closure based data binding, we need a closure that will be executed every time our data changes. So let's create that closure. And in this set, we will be calling our closure every time name changes. And also we will need a function to show our data when button pressed. Alright, so now let's get back to view controller and actually implement our view model setup. But first we need to create our labels. lazy and bind. Right now, you let up. So now let's create our binding. So let's create a function set bindings, and here we're gonna be creating our bindings and call it inside of UDitLoad. In order to do that, we need to call viewModel, change data, and assign it a closure. This closure holds viewModel, and we need to make sure we don't create a strong reference cycle, so we're gonna type unknown self, and here we can make actual binding self. Our name label.text, we assign viewModel name. And inside of show data tab, we will call viewModel show data. So let's test it. And we click show data, and our names change, and our name label changes accordingly to cat viewModel show data. So how it works, we have a closure change data, and this closure called every time our name inside of cat viewModel changes. Alright, so let's try create our own binding. We need to create a new class, call it observable. So it's gonna be class observable, and we're gonna need a generic type because we don't know what type we're gonna be using. And what do we need inside of our observable? Again, we need a closure. It's gonna be private var listener. Again, it's gonna be optional closure that has argument of our generic t type and return void. Then we need value, again of type of our generic t, and didSet, where we again call in our listener, similar to previous example, and we call it with value. Then we need init, with our value, and we need function bind. Which is gonna be holding closure for us of the same type as a listener. And we're gonna assign closure to listener. And call it with the value. as we're assigning our closure to a listener, our closure should be escaping. Alright, so now let's add another property to our view model and test our own observable helper class. So we're gonna need another property and call it age, and it's gonna be of type observable int and observable 0. So it will not get and right Alright, so now let's create second binding. Let's bind our age label and viewModel.age. So how do we do that? We call again viewModel age and call the method bind. Enter to paste the closure, then it's gonna be age, and our age label the text we assign string value of age. And let's try to run it. Now we see 0, show data, and it changes to 5. And the last one is how to create a binding using combine. So let's get back to our cat view model. Import combine framework. And now our class must conform to observable object. And we could create another property with color of type string. We'll initialize it. And we need to add a property wrapper add published in order to create a binding using combine. Now let's change our color to red and get back to view controller. Okay, so how do we use combine publishers? We remove $s. Alright, so now we need key path and let's be backshocks. And it's gonna be on color label. And also we need to store our publisher inside of cancelable, so let's create cells. So it was yelling because it didn't like optional string. You need to assign a string value. So let's give it a shot. So now we see brown, and here we see red. So our combine binding works as well. So here are 3 ways to create a data binding in Swift. There are more ways, for instance using ArcSwift, but it's very similar to the one we used with combine. Thank you for watching this video. If you find it useful, give it a like, and I will see you next episode. Bye bye.